Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast and iTunes' #1 kids and family podcast and an iHeartRadio Podcast Awards Best Kids and Family Podcast nominee. So very excited. And we have a phenomenal guest for you today. His name is Justin Swapp. He is the author of a beautiful middle grade book called Shadow Servant. You know, the holiday season is right around the corner, and I know that you are looking for the perfect holiday gift for the curious kids in your life. Isn't it wonderful being around those kids that just, their eyes, you just know that they're looking around at everything and trying to figure things out. Those curious kids, I have the perfect gift for those curious kids. Little Passports delivers fun-filled packages right to those curious kids' stores every single month, and they're filled with engaging hands-on activities, interactive projects, and unique souvenirs just waiting to be discovered. Little Passport's monthly subscriptions are designed to spark children's curiosity about geography, world cultures, or science. From exploring sea creatures in Costa Rica to building a Big Ben like the one in England or making an ancient Greek headpiece, every month is a different adventure that will fuel their imagination and spark their natural curiosity of the world around them. It really is the perfect gift for kids ages 3 to 13 this holiday season. Order today by going to littlepassports.com/reading. Joining us on the line right now from Ogden in the great state of Utah. He is a fantastic author of middle grade and young adult titles. His latest book is called Shadow Servant. Please welcome to the show, Justin Swapp. Justin, how are you?
Thanks, Jed. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm excited to speak to you. I'm excited to learn about Shadow Servant. And I'm real excited that the first Shadow Servant is part of a series, and the first title in that series was The Magic Shop, and of course, magic is near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, there's some fun parts in book 1 that would really resonate with what you do for sure.
Yeah. So tell us about Shadow Servant, please.
Yeah, so the Shadow Servant is the second book in the Shadow Magic series. First book was The Magic Shop, and it follows Marcus and Ellie Fifth. They're twins. They live in the loft of their grandparents' magic shop, humble little shop, and then they find out that the family's actually magic, and there's a whole lot of family secrets that unravel. And so book 2, has to do with Marcus finding his sister when she goes missing, and he has to go into the magical world and do a bunch of crazy things. So it's gotten some fun reviews so far.
Excellent. One of the things I've spoken to authors about, especially authors who create fantasy, as you have. What's that like, going in and creating these completely new worlds?
It's a lot of things. If you ask my wife, her answer might be different than mine. It takes a lot of time and a lot of brain power, and you kind of obsess about them a little bit, and they become part of you. So it's, you're creating worlds, you're creating characters, and you're creating the interplay between them. Funny little anecdote, in book 1, my favorite scene I actually wrote when I was half asleep. And I woke up and read it, and I was like, oh, that actually kind of works. So weird things happen when you're in that other state of mind.
Yeah, well, absolutely. You have no idea what's going to come out. I imagine, do you ever get to the point where you write a scene and then you have to go back and kind of look through the rules of the universe that you've created to make sure the new scene fits the rules that you had kind of established at the beginning of the book or in a earlier book?
Yeah, so that really kind of depends on your approach to the magic system, if you will. So like Brandon Sanderson's probably the best known author for what you're implying. So a magic system that has really hard rules. Mine, where it's for a bit of a younger audience, kind of like you said, middle grade, young adult. There's rules, but they're not it's not like a full system. So yeah, you got to make sure whatever in fantasy, whatever rules you set for your world, so that could apply to world building as much as it does the magic system, where a magic system is just an element of the world building. That you have to establish the rules so they make sense to the reader, and then you have to kind of stick to them. Or if you break them, you've got a really good reason, and that probably is a turning point or some kind of a revelation in the story.
Is this your favorite style of writing, going in and creating these kind of universes?
You know, I think most fiction is that. It's just different, right? So I've written some horror, and so, you know, there's elements of that too. They just revolve around different dynamics of the human condition. And then depending on how adult the book is, it can become more detailed or more savage or more arresting than maybe for the younger audience.
You know, it's interesting that you bring up the topic of writing horror. I have I have a niece that I love spending time with, and she's 14 right now, and we were talking the other day, and she was asking me if I like scary movies. You know, we're getting ready to visit the haunted houses at Halloween, and I said, yeah, and I especially loved it when I was her age and probably into my 20s. And she asked, and she goes, why do you think we like this stuff so much? And I didn't have an answer for her. What about you? Why do you think, especially young people and especially kids, kind of love the horror and the gore and the terror?
You know, that's a fantastic question. So I think there's a physical response to horror, right? So when you think about adrenaline and your heart beating, and so when an author is good at what they do, they can create emotion in you. And I think some people want to be moved, some people want to be thrilled, some people are just adrenaline junkies. And then if you go with a more kind of philosophical approach, I think horror deals with life and the meaning of life and who has control over it or doesn't, and has power over you or doesn't. And so I think there's people who just want to get a reaction, and horror can do that for you. There's other people, so it's a mental or a kind of a physical, literally a physical reaction to the horror.
Wow, interesting. I know, I don't know exactly when I became a fan of horror. Somewhere in high school, probably. I remember watching The Birds, for Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, when I was very young. But I definitely remember getting into Stephen King books when I was in high school. But I absolutely know when I tapped out of horror, and that was when my wife gave birth to our son. It was really I was right in the middle. I think it was of an Anne Rice novel, and I was loving it. And my son came into the world. And, you know, the next time I had a chance to pick up the book, I picked up that book and started reading, and I'm like, nope, I don't want to be here anymore.
It's interesting, right? So horror, it gets a bad rap. So there's some people mistake the genre of horror as hack and slash or gore, like you said earlier, but horror is actually a larger umbrella genre. And so I'll give you an example. So one of the most horrific movies I saw when I was a kid was a Disney movie called The Watcher in the Woods. Have you ever seen that?
I don't recall it.
Yeah, they actually remade it a few years ago, but it was about, a bunch of kids kind of in the forest, and a girl goes missing. She disappears, and she's in another dimension, and she shows up in mirrors and windows, and it was freaky, and there wasn't a swear word in the movie. There was no blood, but there were these dynamics that were horrific. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, wow, fascinating. It's funny what can terrify us too. And you're right. You don't need the slash and the blood and the guts. There's some really kind of subtle things that can really send a chill up someone's spine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
being trapped in a room, you don't have to die, but somebody being constrained from their normal ability to do a thing can be horrific. And if you can imagine yourself being in that scenario, you can feel the walls coming in on you, and you can feel a loss of breath, and it can feel horrific.
Yeah. It's funny that we're talking about this. I had a dream last night that was kind of horrifying. It wasn't a nightmare, but it was horrifying to me because I was going out on stage and I couldn't remember anything that I was going to do. And I was actually performing and I'm like, going, I am just pulling this out of I don't know where, but this isn't my show. And I woke up and it took me about 5 or 10 minutes to figure out, all right, what do I do in my show?
That's funny. I was listening to your podcast, before I got on here, probably a couple, 3 episodes ago, and you were talking to one of the other authors about your daughter performing with you, and you were improvising, and you're just like, follow along with me, right?
Oh, well, yeah. That was a really inspired moment where, I mean, I just felt divinely inspired. We're in a church and performing for a youth group, and everything just came together, and it was a real joy having my daughter on stage with me, and it was a testament to her kind of quote unquote professionalism in 3rd grade that she was able to trust me and to just go with it, be up on stage and not run off the stage horrified, going, I don't know what he's going to do.
Well, she's got to have some moxie too. That's awesome.
She is. She's great. Both of my kids. I'm very, very blessed. I have 2 amazing kids, an amazing niece, a beautiful wife. Life is so good. Tell me, I'm interested. You're talking. You've created this magic world and magic shop and the Shadow Servant. I know when Harry Potter came out, there was a lot of, it was insanely popular. But there was also a lot of pushback from religious groups. And we're talking about me being divinely inspired. Have you experienced any of that?
Not, not from a religious standpoint, but I think there's one reader I remember specifically when I got a review on the Magic Shop, and it's got 4.4 stars. It's gotten really good reviews. It's won a couple of awards, but there was this parent that felt, misled, I guess. I don't know if that's from my book description, but she thought the book was darker than I think she anticipated it being, and I think the review said something like, "Yeah, it started along great, and then he fooled me, and all of a sudden it got really dark, and like it was this methodical thing that I did, and I was not trying to fool anybody." But and maybe we're talking about horror so much here because there are elements to varying degrees of horror in some of my books. So I grew up and my parents got divorced young, and so as a child, there was a theme there that I probably had to deal with, and that's showing up in my writing some. And so, there's nothing, I mean, these are clean books and that kind of thing. Right. But like there are elements and themes around parenthood and around who's the guardian and who can you trust that are interesting, the way they show up in the books. But no, not from a religious standpoint. I'm a Christian. I'm a religious person. And so in my mind, I divide the fiction world from my personal beliefs. But of course, my personal beliefs are going to dictate to some degree what I would allow in a book or not, and some things that I wouldn't maybe dare write. Or, I don't want to be the person that somebody can point back to and said, he taught me how to swear, or he gave me a new word that I didn't know, or something like that.
Well, my wife is forbidding me from watching Netflix anymore because she's her first language is Spanish, and I'm watching a lot of Spanish shows on Netflix and learning a lot of those bad words. And I come in and go, "Hey, I just learned a new word," and she gets very upset.
What country is she from?
Her family's originally from Puerto Rico. So
I lived in Spain for a few years. That's fun.
Yeah. So it's and that's one of the interesting things that I'm learning is that all these different countries they all speak Spanish, but they all have different swear words. Yeah.
Well, and it's when you go dialect to dialect, some words in one language aren't swear words, and in another region dialect they are.
Yes, I've discovered that. It was unpleasant discovery.
Does she make you flan? Puerto Rican flan is really good.
Yeah. My beautiful wife is beautiful and talented, but she doesn't cook. She doesn't cook. I do the cooking in the house. But it's great. So getting back to Shadow Servant, it must be thrilling. What kind of reaction are you getting from the kids who are reading it? What are they telling you? We're going to find out the reaction that kids and adults are having to Justin's brand new middle grade book, Shadow Servant, in just a minute. Middle grade kids, they're, that middle kind of age, the 8 to 13 kind of age group. They're a really tough group to satisfy, whether it's being in a book or a gift. Well, I have a perfect gift for the middle grade kid in your life, or the preschool kid in your life, or the intermediate grade kid in your life. Little Passports. Little Passports is the perfect holiday gift for curious kids of all ages. Little Passports delivers fun-filled packages right to their door every single month. And these packages are filled with engaging, hands-on activities, interactive projects, and unique souvenirs that are just waiting to be discovered. Little Passport's monthly subscriptions are designed to spark children's curiosity about geography, world culture, or science. Imagine helping those curious kids in your life to explore sea creatures in Costa Rica, to build a Big Ben just like the one in England, or to make an ancient Greek headpiece. Every month, it's a different adventure, and that adventure will fuel their imaginations and spark their natural curiosity of the world around them. It really is the perfect gift for kids ages 3 to 13 this holiday season. Order today by going to littlepassports.com/reading. But it's great. So I getting back to Shadow Servant, it must be thrilling. What kind of reaction are you getting from the kids who are reading it? What are they telling you?
Pretty good so far. So it's got one published review on Amazon. It only came out a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
So I think people, both of these books are 512 pages, so they're not small books.
Whoa.
So the audiobook for the Magic Shop's 11 and a half hours. So it takes a little bit of time for people to get through it. I've actually had the first person who posted a review finished it in 2 days. And, so it's kind of fun. So the reviews have been good, and the feedback that I've gotten face-to-face and verbally from people has been good, but it just barely came out, and the reviews are starting to trickle in, but so far so good.
That's great. Now, I have to tell you, a 500-page middle grade book, that seems like it's a 500-page adult book is a lot. That's
Yeah, maybe it's a mistake, but so back to your earlier question about when you're building worlds, there's two kinds of writers, right? There's the plotters and the pantsers, the people who kind of need to organize everything and plot it out and feel the structure and live within the structure of the characters in the world and the plot and how the characters are going to move through it and that kind of thing. And then there are the people who get their satisfaction out of figuring it out as they go, and I'm one of those. I'm probably somewhere between a plotter and a pantser, but I lean toward pantsing a little bit. And so the process to come up with the characters and the world, it's kind of organic. And you might try something and you go back and it didn't feel right or it didn't work, and you make a change. And so, by the time, some people want to box the book in, it's going to be 250 pages, 280 pages. And then I just kind of go until it's done, and hence 500 pages.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things that surprised me when I wrote my first picture book. I don't even know how many words it is, but I know it's a lot more than 600. So I was very surprised when people were starting to tell me, well, you can only write picture books can only be 600 words long, and I'm like, 600 words? I use more than that to say hello to people sometimes.
Yeah. No, it's interesting when you're confined. That's hard to believe it has to be so few words. But yeah, for me, I like to it's interesting. There's a lot of twists in my book, and part of that is because I've had people ask me, how do you write a twist? And, I don't pre-plan a chapter and say, I'm going to start the chapter here and end the chapter here, and then that's going to be a cool twist. I write it until the twist organically happens, and I know that's the flip of a chapter. And so people will often say, wow, I could never tell where this was going, or you fooled me there. And that's really satisfying as an author. I got you. You thought it was going one way and you took them another, but that's part of that. Stephen King, I think, once said, well, if I put my characters in a situation and I watch what my characters do and I write what I see. And that's kind of how I've approached this. And if I don't know where the book's going, the reader probably doesn't either.
Yeah. I bet a lot of people who don't write or who aren't, don't create on a regular basis, I bet you they kind of scratch their heads sometimes when they hear an author say, well, I don't know where the story's going. The story kind of writes itself, or the characters tell me where they're going. I don't know if you can explain that to someone who doesn't, but I mean, do you have any idea if someone's listening and they're kind of scratching their head, can you help them understand that process a little?
Sure. Yeah. So, I guess it's kind of like, so it's probably a misnomer to say, I have no idea where it's going. I mean, I have some idea. I mean, I have characters and I have a situation and there's a tone and the characters in my mind act a certain way and that informs their decision-making process and those kinds of things. So, it's a matter of saying, what's a series of events that I could put these characters in and how would they interact and what would the interplay be? And yeah, so for some of us, you can kind of watch that evolve and that's the thrill. And so I might stare at the screen for a while and I might think about the characters, but then when it clicks, it just, for me anyway, you know, like, oh, this is how they would respond. And if they respond this way, then this is what happens. And things start to just kind of lay themselves out in front of you. You know, it's like when you're driving a car at night, you can only see as far as the headlights will show you. Mm-hmm. But as you move further, you know, that 10 feet, your headlights are showing you another 10 feet. Mm-hmm. And you're just driving along. Mm-hmm. It's not too dissimilar from that.
Wow, so cool. Well, since I have you here and since this is my podcast, I'm going to take advantage. We've talked a lot about the process of writing and how you go about it. One of the things my amazing niece has said she wants to do is she wants to write a book with me. She wants us to sit down together and create a middle grade book. So what do you think? How should we start that process, do you think?
Oh, that'll be interesting, right? Because, you know, you got the adult and the kid dynamic. I mean, I think the first thing you probably need to do is draw lines on what your roles are going to be. Probably make agreements around how you're going to decide on a character or a plot element or the environment. So, I mean, you got to brainstorm, you got to come up with the stuff, but you almost need, before you can get into that, you almost need to like have a conversation on who gets to do what, because you're going to run into a productivity issue if you think you're playing one role and she's playing another and I get to make that decision, no idea. So you almost have to like create the rules of how you're going to do that together first, and then figure out how you're going to separate the work and then come together and put it together.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be a challenge, but I think it's going to be fun. And one of the reasons I took advantage of you being here to ask that question is because I bet there's 1 or 2 or 200 parents that are out there that are thinking, wow, would it be fun? My kid's really creative, but he doesn't have the confidence to do this himself right now, and maybe we could do it together. And you know, I know one of the things we mentioned earlier, me performing with my daughter, and she performed on stage with me, and I would perform in the dance recitals when they needed a dad, and that was something that was really, really special to us. So I think this is going to be a special moment between me and my niece, and I think it could be a special moment for other parents and other families out there.
I think you're right, and I think it's a great idea. As a matter of fact, on the Shadow Servant, my kids had read, so I've got 4 kids. Ellie and Xander, my 2 youngest, were, you know, Xander was probably 10 or 11 when I wrote this, and Ellie was probably 13 or 14, and they read the first book, and they loved it, and they were really excited about, can we help you with the next book, The Shadow Servant? They read The Magic Shop, and they're like, oh, this is cool. And so my son actually gave me the idea to put the rock guys on the cover. And at that time, so this goes back to me being a pantser, at that time I didn't have them written into the story. And so I figured out a way to write them into the story so they could be relevant. And he got a kick out of knowing that he helped come up with an element or two on the cover, and then the kids at one point were actually helping me plot it out. So in my study here, I had index cards taped to the back of a door so nobody could see the plot, and we would move them around, and so it was a fun bonding moment. It was kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it would be a fun bonding moment sitting down and co-reading a Shadow Servant with your kids. It's a beautiful thing. We don't stop reading with our kids when they start to read on their own. It's something we should absolutely do with them throughout their lives. And you know, I've said it a million times here in the podcast. I'm not talking about sitting down with your 12-year-old snuggled up on the couch, although there's nothing wrong with that. But at the very least, you can read the books together. Especially nowadays, we have ebooks and different kinds of formats. You can read the books together, talk about it on the way to dance class or on their way to school. And what kind of conversations do you think families can have after reading or while reading Shadow Servant?
Well, I'll make a couple comments there. So I love that you cited that. So, we live in this wonderful world with all this technology. And so one of my favorite reviews on the Magic Shop, the first book, was a father who picked up the audiobook. Mm-hmm. The audiobook is phenomenal. Steve Barnes is the narrator, and he's magic. Like, I had people say, I can't believe this is one person with all these voices. And so it's a different experience when you're listening to somebody act it out. Mm-hmm. It's actually a different product. I remember when I heard it for the first time, I was probably, I was reviewing his work, and I was like 10 chapters in, and I was like, did I write this? and I had this really weird moment, and then I realized he added his art to mine, and it was something totally different. Mm-hmm. And so my initial reaction was, it was unfamiliar to me. Mm-hmm. And so when I got this review, and it's this father who said, I had such fun listening to the Magic Shop on the way to dropping my son off to school every day. It was a bonding moment. And that made me feel really good that I brought a father and a son closer together mm-hmm. through a different medium, which was an audiobook, but they were doing the same thing. So the themes, like I kind of alluded to earlier, when you talk about what can you review with your kids, I mean, whatever you value as a parent and whatever those values are that you're trying to teach your children, those themes come up or get challenged or show up in all media that we consume, TV shows, music, books. And so with the Shadow Servant, like I said to you before, we've got shady characters and we've got parents, and you don't know if you can trust them. And again, that's probably colored by, some of my earlier experiences. But you also have other family that come in and play important roles. And so you can talk about, the importance of family and how we should stick together and support each other, and help each other live the values that we believe in. And what do you do when somebody challenges that and tries to make that harder for you or steer you in a direction that, the family doesn't think you should go?
Beautiful. And I absolutely agree. I mean, media is such, it's so useful when we use it. I think there's so many people who get used by media. They sit in front of it and they're a sponge and they're just a blob in front of a screen or even in front of a book. But if you use media, you can absolutely teach and reinforce any kind of values, no matter what you're watching. If you're watching something that is completely against the values that you can have a conversation about that.
100%.
Yes.
Yeah, these life themes are all around us, and if you have he who has eyes, let him see. Right? If you can see them, then you can know to talk about them. And if you're a loving parent, you would want to address those with your kid.
Absolutely. Well, we want people to connect with you. So where can they find out more about Shadow Servant and about Justin Swapp?
So you can go to my website, justinswapp.com. I'm on Twitter, @JustinSwapp. And I think I've got a Facebook page for the Shadow Servant or the Shadow Magic series as well. So you can hit me up anywhere on there, and I'm pretty responsive, and I do a lot of trash talking. I'm a Utah Jazz fan, so basketball season's about to start. Last preseason game starts in about 2 hours, and I'm going to get crazy.
Well, I'm sorry that I'll be rooting against you when your team plays the Celtics, but that's okay. That's one of the beauties of friendship and sports. I've had such a great time speaking to you. I know there's a new project out. Would you come back to let us know when the new project's available?
Absolutely, love it.
Our guest today has been we've been talking about everything. We've been talking about his brand new book, Shadow Servant. We talked about the first book in the series, Magic Shop. We've been talking about horror, fantasy, family, creating, the creative process. This has been a great episode. Justin Swapp, thanks so much for being part of the show.
Thanks, Jed. You too.
Justin mentioned that the audiobook version of Shadow Servant is available on Audible. We would love you to go to audibletrial.com/respect to get your copy. In fact, you can get a free copy by signing up for Audible's free 30-day trial membership, and you'll also be helping to support the podcast. You do not want to miss the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. I have to say this upcoming guest been one of the most anticipated guests. When I announced this person, that I was going to interview this person, people went bananas. On the next Reading with Your Kids podcast, Candace Cameron Bure, the star of Full House, of amazing Hallmark Channel movies, and the author of Candace Center Stage. She is going to be the next guest on the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Please also make sure you visit littlepassports.com/reading. Little Passports is the perfect holiday gift for that curious kid on your holiday shopping list. With the subscription to Little Passports, kids get a fun-filled package every single month designed to inspire their curiosity in geography, world culture, or science. For kids of all ages, order today at littlepassports.com/reading. Hey, I want to thank Justin Swapp for being here today. Make sure you check out his book, Shadow Servant. And we also want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.